And so in chapter 8, Daniel is still dealing with visions and what's going on. And with historical hindsight, we can actually tell and go, oh, wow. We can actually make a lot more sense of these things. Whereas we know from last week in chapter 7, Daniel was like, hey, he was able to know a dream even without hearing it and interpreting it, and then he was able to interpret another. But when it came to his own vision God had given him, he's like, hey, I have no clue. So is he too close to it, right? So he needs help from God to understand these visions that God has given him. So we're going to find that out in chapter 8 as we continue to press on. Okay? So from the introduction, Daniel's journey through visions continues. His previous dreams revealed beasts and kingdoms. We know that. Of course, they were metaphors. The beasts were metaphors as well as the giant figure, whatnot of different layers. Now chapter 8 unveils more. A ram and a goat clash, symbolizing great empires. Okay. Horns rise and fall, foreshadowing rulers to come. So now, horn imagery may not mean a whole lot to us, but when you think in general, let's just think of like rams or whatever, right? So what do horns provide for animals? Let's take out all the mating rituals, but what do horns provide? Protection, right? So, you have kind of a pretty hard head which supports the bone structure. And so, so it provides protection. So you can ram something, you can ram an enemy. So if you're an herbivore, right, you can try kicking or ramming. And so these are things in a sense that I think when we think of horns, we may not think of those things immediately, the kind of the protection aspect or what it may bring an animal, okay? So I think it would have been more intuitive to people then, since they were a little more removed from that in our lives, okay? So let's turn to Daniel chapter 8 and let's hear the first 4 verses, okay? In the 3rd year of the reign of King Belshazzar, of course he's named after his god, right? Bel. Okay, in the reign of King Belshazzar, a vision appeared to me, Daniel, after that which appeared to me at the first. And I saw in the vision, and when I saw, I was in Susa, the capital, which is in the province of Elam. And I saw in the vision, and I was at the Ulai Canal. I raised my eyes and saw, and behold, a ram standing on the bank of the canal. It had 2 horns, and both horns were high, but one was higher than the other, and the higher one came up at last. Okay, in verse 4, I saw the ram charging westward and northward and southward. No beast could stand before him, and there was no one who could rescue from his power. He did as he pleased and became great. So we go, okay, so what does this ram represent, right? Because whatever it is, it seems to be powerful and nothing seems to be able to stop it, right?
Some countries.
Yeah, so just kind of what we've, if we go, okay, well, what has happened in Daniel before? We go, yeah. That's we kind of know the lay of the land, so it'll probably be an empire or a ruler, and he'll have great power, okay? And what about the different directions this ram goes, and nobody seems to be able to stop him. He does what he wants. See, so it would seem like this would be a king in charge of a large empire or the empire itself. So those would kind of be the guesses one would make after going through this first 7 chapters of Daniel. And that would be a fairly accurate guess because it just makes sense, okay? So a couple things. The 3rd year, that's around 550 BC, so it's 2 years after the dream in Daniel chapter 7. So you notice now that it's the text, the text of the real estate of the text, right, is really kind of focusing on these visions that God gives. And you go, well, what happened in between those 2 years? What happened in between, right, from chapter 7 and the years that passed before that? So these are the things that God says, hey, I want recorded in Scripture. So a lot of the other stuff is, okay, it's not that it's unimportant, it's very important for Daniel, but those things are not really what God wants for his people through the ages, okay? Susa, what's that? That's the capital of Medes and the royal residence of later Persian kings. And of course, the river was mentioned, and of course that's a river, a canal near Susa, okay? And one was higher, talking about a horn. So that kind of mirrors the bear in Daniel's first vision, okay, who was raised up on one side, okay? So indicating Persia was superior in the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? So, and what is this? It goes westward, and it goes in 3 different directions. Well, because it kind of has its home base and it's spreading outward, okay? So this is a powerful empire, and it's controlling what? Like large swathes of territory, that type of thing, okay? So Susa, what's the big deal with that? Well, that's the influential city of Persia, and it's kind of the source or the seat of the empire's power, and whoosh, right, spreading out from there. So it's kind of the home base, okay? And most empires, kind of like Rome, had a home base of Rome, right? So Alexander the Great had a home base of Macedon, where he came from. Well, we could say Greece, but that was really kind of on the fringes of Greece, even though Macedonians technically weren't Greeks proper, but it was part of that, okay? So here we're talking about the Medo-Persian Empire, okay? And that it expands and controls large amounts of territory, okay? So that's giving us the lay of the land. But another animal will enter the scene. Let's see what's happening here. And often it may not always seem to be, well, it makes you wonder, like, well, why this animal as opposed to another one? Because the animal that's going to now show up on the scene, I would think, well, if I saw a fight between a ram and this animal, I would put my money on the ram, right? But let's continue. Verses 5 through 8, okay? As I was considering, behold, a male goat came from the west across the face of the whole earth. He must be a really ornery billy goat who's stubborn, eat anything and not quit, without touching the ground. Okay, so what's the deal with this goat? I mean, you could say, well, this is impossible. Well, it's a vision or a dream. So it's not weird that animals could be doing this sort of thing. But what? He came from the west across the face of the whole earth without touching the ground. So now that was one of the directions the ram was going, right? So in a sense, the goat is responding, saying, hey, we're not going to let you go too far west, because why? We're going to stop you, okay? So, and he's moving without touching the ground, which would think what? Ease of movement, perhaps speed, right? And the goat had a conspicuous horn between his eyes. He came to the ram with the 2 horns, which I had seen standing on the bank of the canal, and he ran at him in his powerful wrath. I saw him come close to the ram, and he was enraged against him, and struck the ram and broke his 2 horns. He is a pretty ornery billy goat then. Nobody's going to mess with him. Okay. And the ram had no power to stand before him, but he cast him down to the ground and trampled on him, and there was no one who could rescue the ram from his power. Then the goat became exceedingly great, but when he was strong, the great horn was broken, and instead there came up 4 conspicuous horns toward the 4 winds of heaven. Let's stop here, okay? So let's say, okay, Persia. Let's put on our history hats. Who defeated the Persians? Romans. You're leapfrogging an empire. The Greeks. Specifically, who's the great general who kind of made the Greeks great? Alexander the Great, right? Well, or was it, I think it was Philip of Macedonia. Wasn't it Philip and then his son Alexander, right? What happened after Alexander died? He died young, right? And he didn't have an heir to take over, per se. Then who ruled? Because his empire was huge, went all the way to India, North Africa, right? So, the Mediterranean basin, didn't really take over huge amounts of Europe, but okay, what ended up happening? Oh, well, when he died, his 4 leading generals, basically, they ran the empire. So you have the empire was divided into 4 parts and became 4 empires. Because maybe at first they were okay, but things never last, right? Or even, oh yeah, we'll all get together well because we know each other, but that's often, that fighting is going to break out eventually, right? But yeah, so on the bottom of page 1, from the west a goat charges, its single horn strikes the ram, shattering its power. At the height of its strength, the goat's horn breaks, 4 new horns sprout in its place. That's Alexander the Great and his successors, right? So, and that's what I put on page 2. Alexander the Great. From the west, Alexander armies moved swiftly, conquering from Macedon, northern Greece, trampled on the Medo-Persian Empire. So, so there was this movie 300s, where 300 Spartans faced this giant Persian army. I never saw the entire thing, but I know of it, where they meet at a particular choke point. I don't remember the specific place, but the 300 Spartans were able to hold off. And basically, they lost, but in a sense, Persia was really never, in a sense, able to regain and become super powerful after that. So I think what happened is they had a spy who said, oh, well, there's a way that you can kind of go up and go back around. And so they were able to kind of break the choke point, and the 300 Spartans were killed, if I remember history. Did anybody see that movie? 300? Or my daughter saw it, and she goes, oh, that's a movie for Marines. I'm like, oh, okay.
What movie are you talking
300, it's about the 300 Spartans who held off the Persian Empire because they had to go through this narrow pass. And of course, when you have to fight in a really small real estate and you can't bring a huge army to bear, you don't really have numerical advantages, don't help a whole lot. What you can do is you can keep attacking, and then the guys defending eventually get tired. So you can do that, but that's a huge war of attrition. So, and you could win if you have enough people to sacrifice and you have a country willing to do that, right? So this isn't the exact same thing that's happening with Ukraine and Russia, but Russia has a lot larger of a population, and the leader, right, he's willing to sacrifice lots and lots and lots of men, right? We wouldn't, if we were at a war and we lost that many people, there would be riots in the street and people would be angry, but that's a different country. And so you can go, oh, well, they're fighting valiantly and they're getting support. Yeah, but they're outnumbered. And eventually, right, in a war of attrition, they're going to lose if that continues because they don't have enough resupplies. So something has to come to change the game, or we know how it'll end up. You don't have to be a rocket scientist. Okay? So these are the 4 horns. These are the generals: Cassander, Lysimachus, Ptolemy, and Seleucus. So we're really more familiar with the Ptolemy and the Seleucids, kind of in the Judean region, because Judea ends up kind of being between those two, and depending on who kind of runs, decides who's going to control their empire. So the Seleucids were kind of more Middle Eastern, and the Ptolemies were more Egypt-based. And so you kind of go, well, they're just kind of across the Mediterranean Sea there. So, yeah. Okay. So that kind of shows what's going on there. Okay. So let's continue on. Okay. 9 through 12. This is just really just a vision of history, and we kind of know it. We have an advantage that Daniel didn't have. Okay. Verses 9 through 12. Out of one of them came a little horn, which grew exceedingly great toward the south, toward the east, toward the glorious land. It grew great even to the host of heaven. And some of the host and some of the stars it threw down to the ground and trampled on them. So there's this little horn that's going to become even more powerful. Go, what? What's it doing that? Right? So, okay. It became great, even as great as the prince of the host. And the regular burnt offering was taken away from him, and the place of his sanctuary was overthrown, and a host will be given over to it with the regular burnt offering because of transgression, and it will throw truth to the ground, and it will break it, and it will act and prosper. Okay? So this seems a pretty mighty empire, right? So if we think that, we're going to think, ooh, well, is this Rome? But it's one of the horns, right? And think about being in his, I was going to say Israeli, but I guess Israelite, okay? So one of these horns will become very powerful and then cause a whole lot of ruckus, and you go, oh, yeah. So we know who this one will be historically, and so the way that it's described matches, or it will be exactly how this guy comes across to the Israelite people. He's powerful like that, and he will disrupt things. Okay, so so the things that are mentioned in these verses: the glorious land, Israel, even to heaven. This is referring to Antiochus Epiphanes. Okay, Antiochus Epiphanes really means the manifestation. So I think he was called like Theos, so something like he said that he was the manifestation of God on earth. So yeah, that didn't go over too well with the Israelites, especially when he desecrated their temple. Okay, so even to heaven, Antiochus's arrogance symbolized by the horn exalting itself. The star represents the wise among God's people. Prince of the host, Yahweh, often called Lord of hosts. The continual burnt offering refers to daily temple sacrifices halted by Antiochus. So did you kind of catch that? So it's even talking about that, if you have the Israelite mind, you're going to go, you mean, so we're going to have a temple, but whatever goes on there will be stopped. Okay? And then overthrown. Antiochus seized the Jerusalem temple for 3 years, from December 167 to 164 BC. So, and what he did was not weird. So what he ended up doing is he desecrated the temple, okay, put in a pagan figure, I don't remember which one it was, and then he would sacrifice swine in there just to, right? Why would you do that? To show I'm the boss and you're not, right? So in his way of thinking, he wanted every land that he ruled, he wanted them to become Greek. He wanted them to be culturally what he was. He wanted them to become religiously what he was. He didn't want these things dividing the lands that he ruled. So what he would go in and he did this, it wasn't just Judea, he did it everywhere. He did such things. But what ended up happening, well, if you know the story of the Maccabees, you know what happened. It angered the Israelites so much that Judah Maccabees was able to kind of gather a resistance force, and then his sons, because he ends up dying, continue the fight, and they liberate themselves from the Greeks. They're still fighting and squabbling that goes on, but they liberate themselves until the Romans. So for, I guess, about a century. They're a free nation because of that. And then what ends up happening is there's a squabble between the Pharisees and the Sadducees, and the Sadducees invite the Romans to help deal with their enemies. Well, when you invite an empire to come in and squash people you don't like, the empire often won't leave, which is what happened. So now Israel they became part of, probably would have happened anyway, became part of the Roman Empire by an invitation from Jewish leadership. Pretty bad. So anyway, yeah, we can kind of see all of the stuff that's happening, right? So not very pretty, okay? So if we turn the page, because there's some linkage to Revelation 12. Okay, so on page 3, I kind of bring that linkage. So remember I said that there are a number of kind of images or even vocabulary, things that are used in Daniel that John incorporates in the book of Revelation, either to further expound on or to use as background imagery to help us understand what he's trying to convey. So if you don't know the book of Daniel, you won't understand Revelation. But there's a number of images that are used in the Old Testament that you need to know well before you even should try to study Revelation. Okay? Revelation 12:4 further develops a theme by depicting the dragon representing Satan casting a third of the stars of the heaven to the earth. His tail swept a third of the stars out of the sky and flung them to the earth. The dragon stood in front of the woman who was about to give birth so that it might devour her child the moment he was born. So you can kind of see this imagery, but it's expanding because now, well, the woman is Mary and the child is, right? I mean, if we look at it in the big macro picture. Okay? So, dragons attempt to usurp divine authority and disrupt God's plans. Yeah. But it won't stop them. God's plans will still come to fruition. Okay? So a whole lot of chaos and stuff in these visions. And fortunately, we kind of have history to kind of help us understand these. So let's continue. So have you heard of the term the abomination of desolation? This comes from Daniel. Okay, and that's also used elsewhere, not just in the book of Daniel. So in verses 13 and 14, and if all of this is just all crazy talk, and you're like, well, I don't know what's going on, just kind of ride the horse, okay, and see if it all kind of clicks and comes together, because we're kind of getting this piecemeal as Daniel is conveying this to us. Then I heard a holy one speaking. Remember the previous vision? I don't know what this means. Help, right? So, holy one. And another holy one said to the one who spoke. Oh, this kind of sounds like the vision Isaiah had, chapter 6. For how long is the vision concerning the regular burnt offering, the transgression that makes desolate, and the giving over of the sanctuary, and the host to be trampled underfoot? So it says, how long is this, the desecration of the temple, supposed to be? Right? Of course, this is metaphorical language, but it'll still give us an idea. And he said to me, for 2,300 evenings and mornings, then the sanctuary shall be restored to its rightful state. Well, that's what? 3 years and something. Okay, so, but it's just kind of, 22,003, so why didn't you just say, but this is, right? So, and there may be something more to the meaning of these numbers than that. I wouldn't know what that is. I mean, if I really geeked out on this, I might be able to, tell more, but I didn't, because I did this lesson in one day yesterday. So, and I wasn't going to use my vacation time geeking out on this. So, not that it wouldn't be a worthwhile thing to really delve into, but I can't. If because I'm thinking, well, so it's conveying something, but the way it's conveyed carries meaning, and I couldn't tell you enough on that. There might be some scholar who might really know a whole lot about that and be able to convey that. I'm not that guy, okay? So I have to be honest with you. I mean, hey, really? Very few of us are learned. Who in all of humanity are actually learned scholars? It's not a whole lot. Most of the people are just faking it. My opinion. But maybe I'm faking it with my opinion. All right. Shall we press on? Okay. 13 and 14. Okay. We did 13 and 14. Okay. Yeah. So, Holy One, angel, transgression makes desolate refers to the pagan altar in Jerusalem's sanctuary. Okay, we cover that. So restored, that's the Maccabees. They cleansed the temple in 164 BC. So, and that changes Israelite history big time. Because now, so when Rome takes over, it was 69 BC. So when Jesus is born, there's old people. You still have, a generation of people who remember being free, right? And so, and in a sense, they're looking for a Messiah to kind of free them from the yoke of Rome, like Judah Maccabeus freed the Israelites from the yoke of Greece. Okay, So that's really the Messiah most of the people are expecting. Okay, they're not. So, and the interpretations kind of, they take, the visual imagery that supports that idea and basically use those. Peacemaker stuff, I'll throw it out the window, right? They just take the ones that kind of hold that vision and they go, he's going to be the conquering Messiah, this is going to be him, right? And of course, when you do that with symbols and metaphor, because you have to go, well, are we using those correctly, or are we just adapting them to fit what we want it to be? And that's really dangerous with kind of symbols, because symbols are so easily manipulated. And so when you approach it, you don't want to approach it with whatever you're thinking. You basically want to approach it with nothing, and only kind of use what the text gives you and build from that. So, because we see kind of what that led to, right? So, have any of you seen this series called The Chosen? Okay, we just started watching it, and it's basically drama on Jesus's. Doesn't even cover his birth, but just kind of starts with him being a rabbi. And and little kids meet him, but it's really it's 4 seasons. I'm just 5 episodes in season 1. And Sherry said, "Oh well, let's watch it." I'm like, I've seen those Jesus things, and they're always so shallow, and and Jesus has no personality because, well, we don't want to do anything where we're going to blaspheme Jesus. I get you, but he was a real guy, and he laughed, and he lived, and he did all that, and wasn't sinless. And this is the best series that I've seen, where they actually try to fill in the blanks in a good way, where Jesus is a real person. And I like that. And also, they bring in there's a few places where they bungled it, but compared to a lot of the others, way better. And they bring in a whole lot of historical bits that are like, wow, and little bits that are historically accurate. So I'm loving that as a history geek. And then they're laying the groundwork for a whole lot of other things. Like Peter's ear gets cut, and you go, oh, well, it's going to help us understand why he's going to cut the centurion's ear when Jesus is in Gethsemane. And then they have Nicodemus. He's all this groundwork is being laid, so he wants to see Jesus. And when Nicodemus says, we know that no one could do the things that you are doing unless God is with him, you go, oh, well, Nicodemus has seen a whole bunch of stuff, and it's just really good. I like it. So I'm really impressed with it. I thought it was going to be a typical cheesy, and whatever drama, and I just thought, I'm just tired of those. But this one, so far, I would say it's worth seeing to kind of get a feel for things. So, anyways, back to Daniel. Okay, 15 through 18. Okay, because all this in some way points to Christ, right? Okay, when I, Daniel, had seen the vision, I sought to understand it. We have the hindsight of history, he did not. And behold, there stood before me one having the appearance of a man. And I heard a man's voice between the banks of the Ulai, and it called, Gabriel, make this man understand the vision. So what's the voice, and who's Gabriel? The voice is God. Gabriel, right, is an angel. Okay. So he came near where I stood. And when he came, I was frightened and fell on my face. But he said to me, understand, O Son of Man, that the vision is for the end of time. Oh, okay. So there's stuff, and then in several centuries, hence, but then there's stuff that's what? So, the stuff, and it was like the previous vision, right? It kind of pointed to Rome, but then from Rome it kind of leapfrogs to the end of time, because Jesus is born during the Roman Empire, right? And he's going to be the fulfillment of time. So you can boop, boop. So, it's that same sort of telescoping thing kind of going on here, okay? So, and that's what the angel tells him, right? So, so appearance of a man, that's the archangel Gabriel. This is on page 4 of the lesson. Fell on my face. Well, he sees a holy being. He's right. Wow. This is not an everyday thing. He knows he's sent from God. He's showing reverence. And so you can go, why is he bowing before an angel, right? The angel could say, well, I'm not God, but he knows God sent the angel, right? Time and then referring to, okay, so this is, time refers to Antiochus' persecution, not the world's end. And I'll say yes and no, because, right, it does, because we can kind of see this, but what are the continuing reverberations of that? So we can say, yeah, it's going to do that, but, you know, that, and that's going to have echoes until the end of time. So, so we can say, well, this is where the vision stops, but the impact does not stop there, okay? And so, hence the angel says what? For the end of what? Right? For the time of the end. So this is, and the ongoing implications are, well, Jesus and everything that follows, okay? So, kind of laying the groundwork. Okay. Let's continue on. So, and he had spoken to me, I fell into a deep sleep with my face on the ground, and he touched me and made me stand up. So was he in some sort of, was he having a vision? Did he pass out? It's hard to make sense, but he was in some, or was he in some type of trance? But he touched me and made me stand up. He said, okay, behold, I will make known to you what shall be at the latter end of the indignation, for it refers to the appointed time of the end. As for the ram that you saw with the two horns, these are the kings of Media and Persia, and the goat is the king of Greece, and the great horn between the eyes is the first king. As for the horn that was broken in place of which four others arose, four kingdoms shall arise from his nation, but not with his power. Okay? So he's kind of explaining the things that will happen. I'm not going to say in the immediate future, because it's not immediate, but over the next, centuries. Okay? Of course, Daniel's not going to know this. It hasn't happened yet. So somebody has to tell him, right? We can piece it together, okay? And even without the angel, I would say we could have pieced it together from history. But this just kind of seals the deal, okay? So, as for the horn that was broken, in place of which four kings arose, four kingdoms shall arise, and from his nation, but not with his power. Okay, so that kind of just explains it. Okay, I don't think we need to kind of press on. Let's continue on. Okay, so, and at the latter end of their kingdom, when the transgressors have reached their limits, a king of bold face, one who understands riddles, shall arise. Okay. His power shall be great, but not by his own power, and he shall cause fearful destruction, and shall succeed in what he does, and destroy mighty men, and the people who are the saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and with his own mind he shall become great. In his own mind he shall become great. So this is kind of, and he shall even rise up against the prince of princes, and he shall be broken, but by no human hand. The vision of the evenings and the mornings that has been told is true, but seal up the vision, for it refers to many days from now. Okay, so it sounds as if what's happening. Further explanation. So a leader will arise who will understand riddles. This is just what? Somebody who's crafty, who can be devising. This kind of, it's not just saying that he's smart, but he's cunning. Okay, that's kind of the implication of this. Okay, people.
Does this refer to somebody that actually knows?
Well, the thing is, he won't have help. So we're just going to have to kind of, we don't want to go too far, because this just sits here and it's going to sit unsettled for a little bit. Okay, that's where Daniel leaves us. I'll bring in some Thessalonians to kind of, because it kind of matches, so we can cheat a little bit, but the text just kind of leaves us like, what? This doesn't sound good. But whatever is being mentioned, see, this person is great in his own mind. What's the implication of that? Well, he's arrogant. He's not really great. but, so he's, in a sense, he's being aided. Okay, so the way that this is being painted is that there's a spiritual war going on, and this guy is being aided by evil, Satan, and so he sees himself as really great. He's really not that great, but he's getting assistance, so he sees himself as greater than he is. Well, what did he call himself? The manifestation of God on earth. Okay, so. If you're not really the manifestation of God on earth and you're saying that, I mean, okay. So we kind of have politicians who really kind of have big egos, right? I mean, so our current president was able to kind of help a deal which brought some Americans home, right? And I would have thought, oh, well, he's going to thank, Turkey, who really did most of the work behind the scenes. He didn't really. He claimed credit. Well, I was the one who kind of orchestrated this. Why didn't you just say, hey, thank you for all the people who made this happen, right? Instead of being gracious. So, he is kind of doing the same sort of thing. So in his mind, he's great, okay? And you can kind of tell that, because he's doing stuff that he goes, why is he even wanting to kind of change the Supreme Court? Because in his mind, he's thinking, I'm going to leave this great legacy behind. Okay, so he kind of sees that as kind of his legacy. He wants to leave these huge things, these huge changes, and he wants to be the one in the future, because he'll be dead or won't remember. Okay, and and the main Republican nominee also has a huge ego, okay? But, it's not atypical for people who want to hold positions of power. In some ways, I'm not going to say it's necessary, but you almost have to kind of have some sort of drive to go through the nonsense to get there. So you have, and so regular people are just going, no, not worth it, right? I mean, probably 99 out of 100 people are, no, not worth it, because of all the nonsense you have to go through. So you have to have something that's really going to, and so strong personalities are usually the only ones who are really going to kind of strive for such a thing. Okay? So that's going to kind of, right? So let's look at verse 27. We'll bring in 2 Thessalonians and we'll kind of stop. But right now, this just kind of leaves us, wow. So this sounds really bad, that this bad stuff is happening and evil is involved in this in some way. Yes. And in a sense, it's setting the stage for a greater battle that will take place. And of course, this will be with Jesus and evil himself, right? Okay. Verse 27, okay? Okay. Okay, so I'm not really sure where we ended, but his power shall be great, not by his own. He shall cause fearful destruction. He shall succeed in what he does, and he destroys mighty men and people who are saints. By his cunning he shall make deceit prosper under his hand, and with his own mind he shall become great. Without warning he shall destroy many. He shall even rise up against the prince of princes. He shall be broken, but by no human hand. See? So all of this is what? This is a spiritual war taking place in the history of humanity, with human people involved. Okay? The vision of the evenings and mornings that was being told is true. The seal of vision for now. Okay, that's it for that. Verse 27. And I, Daniel, was overcome and lay sick for some days. So whatever happened, this experience left Daniel spent. Okay? So what he experienced, this isn't the whole totality of everything. This is what he could put in print and explain, but the whole experience was greater and left him, right? And I lay sick for some days. Then I rose and went about the king's business, but I was appalled by the vision and did not understand it. And the angel told him, basically, the main gist, and he says, but I did not understand it. So it was so powerful that he's wrestling with it. Yeah, I know you told me what it means in my mental part of the brain, but the rest of me cannot handle it. There's cognitive dissonance. And so he has to somehow get the information he was given, and it has to wrestle with the visions, the emotions, everything else, where he can kind of make sense of it in a better way. So he says, well, here's the information and I conveyed it. But in his own brain, he's not able to handle it all too well. Okay, so let's look at 2 Thessalonians. This is the end. So verse 27, exhausted, Daniel struggles to comprehend the vision. Happened to us, I think we would be the same way. We would go, oh, he's some weak old dude. No. He had stuff and it just blew him away. And so, if we go through this huge trauma or event, it leaves us spent, okay? And so we often need time to decompress and kind of bounce back on our feet. This is what happened to Daniel, okay? So it was just a huge thing, and he the visceralness of it, he's trying to handle, okay? So, wow, very powerful, okay? Appalled carries a sense of being horrified or desolate, stronger than mere confusion, okay? So when the text says that, okay. Ending with Daniel's bewilderment leaves us to grapple with the vision's implications, mirroring Daniel's own struggle. So he's there, and it's like, wow, none of this makes sense. What's going on? And then, boop, we'll stop it. And then chapter 9 continues, but it's like, okay, are you changing subjects on us, Daniel? Are you moving on to something new? What's going on? Next week, 2 Thessalonians 2. This is verses 8 through 10, and then let's see if we can kind of help a little bit, okay? And then the lawless one will be revealed, whom the Lord Jesus will kill with the breath of his mouth and bring to nothing by the appearances of his coming. The coming of the lawless one is by the activity of Satan, and with all power and false signs and wonders. So it kind of sounds similar, though this is what, right? And with all wicked deception for those who are perishing, because they refuse to love both the truth and to be saved. So what Daniel saw, in a sense, is that of Antiochus and what's going place, but he was given a bigger spiritual picture of what will take place and what Christ will do. So when you see this one, you go, oh, but there's a greater battle between good and evil, and it'll be by the Son of God. Okay, and so what Daniel saw left him spent, and it wasn't even the main one. So with that as a preview, think about what Jesus will face, which will be way worse, okay? So both passages, 2 Thessalonians and Daniel, refer to a significant figure who arises in time of great moral and spiritual decay. 2 Thessalonians, the figure is called the lawless one, while in Daniel he is described as a fierce-looking king, master of intrigue, or understands riddles, right? 2 Thessalonians notes that the lawless one's power is under Satan's workings, okay, involving displays of power and deception. Similarly, Daniel mentions that the king, fierce king, will become strong, but not by his own power, implying a supernatural or diabolical source of strength. See? So a greater battle is coming, okay? Deception plays a crucial role in both texts. The lawless one in 2 Thessalonians deceives those who refuse to love the truth. In Daniel, deceit prospers under the fierce king, allowing him to destroy many and oppose the prince of princes. Okay, so see what we're taking in Daniel, and it leaves us uneasy because it's not really resolved. Okay, it kind of is when the angel says blah, 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 but Daniel is left spent, exhausted, can't make sense of it. And so he's given this vision, and through that, we get a picture of the greater battle between good and evil. Of course, the greatest one will be between Christ and Satan, okay? But there will be another one where someone assisted by evil will also have a greater battle. And so you think, well, how is that? So think about when Christ comes and he's crucified. Did everything happen only because everyone was operating in his or her best interests, or they thought so? Not only, Okay? So there are spiritual forces at play. Though we can look at all the stuff and we can go, right? And we can even, yet we could still kind of see, think about Pilate, right? What does Pilate's wife tell Pilate about Jesus? Well, don't mess with him because I had a dream, etc., etc. So he's kind of saying, just let the guy go. You know he's not guilty. But his own pragmatism saying, I can't because if the people of Israel riot, my political career is going to be over. So he does everything to save his political career. And even though he did everything, he still ends up being a political loser. And basically, at the end, he dies at some minor post at the edge of the Roman Empire. Basically, a loser position he's given. And so he tried all that, but it didn't work, right? And yet there are forces at play. So we have to go, well, what about the religious leadership? Are they in the thrall of Satan when they're doing all their conniving and with the Roman leadership? Well, could be. But whatever is happening, there's a lot of forces at play, and you have to go, it's a lot bigger than what we can just see. So if you lift up the sheet, go, oh, this is a huge spiritual battle. And it is, because this is the battle that will win our salvation. But it's taking place in a human arena, where humans are free players making their own choices. But it's more than that. And we'll stop there, because we're supposed to be left in a state of unease where Daniel leaves us. So we're going to do that. We're gonna be at a state of unease, and then next week we hope we won't be so uneasy when we approach chapter 9. Okay? Yeah. So sometimes everything isn't just apples and oranges. Let's close with prayer, shall we? Our Father, there. Wow. I mean, this stuff is great, but also hard to understand at times. And we might even think, well, why did you relay information to us in this way? And there are parts of us that, in a sense, we have no way to really understand what is taking place beyond our senses and abilities. And these are just some ways where you can touch us in some way where we can get a sense of things or a wisp of it, and that's probably all that we can handle. But through these, we are to take in more than the mere words. Let us also be affected by Daniel and understand that something much greater is taking place than merely what the words describes. Grant us faith that we understand that you are the true King of Kings, and all things will come to end as you will. In our Savior's name we pray. Amen.